So my name's Jill Davison, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about money and welfare rights and try to give you some ideas on how to make the best out of what can be a really tricky situation if you've recently been diagnosed with cancer, or if you've had cancer for a long time, or you're looking after a loved one or have a relative with cancer. So money is an incredibly important part of our everyday life, and looking at welfare rights can be a really daunting task. Lots of the systems and schemes in place can be really complex and really hard to get to understand what's out there for each and every individual. So the first lot of benefits that we're going to talk about is means tested benefits. These are the most complex ones. They're based on individual circumstances. So every single person, family, household can be different, and that's why it can be incredibly difficult to understand what you're entitled to and how to get access to it. So basically the government have set up a scheme, and they're called different things for different age groups, but it's basically a catch-all for anybody that doesn't have enough money to live on. They can be things like universal credit, which you might have heard about, or pension credit if you're an older person, somebody of state retirement pension age. They can change depending on if you live alone or if you're married. They can have an impact if you're caring for somebody or you need care and support. So it's really, really important that you do check if your circumstances change, that you're still getting the right amount of money to help you. There are support with some costs of living, such as help with rent and council tax, and also service charges if you pay them for a property that you live in. It can help in lots of different scenarios, whether you live on a caravan or on a boat, or whether you own your own home, you can still get help with things like council tax. So the other set of benefits, which is really difficult to get your head around, is the ones that aren't based on how much money you've got coming in, but they're based on your national insurance contributions or what you're doing at the time, such as caring for somebody. And one of the benefits that's quite often not claimed is something called employment support allowance, based on your national insurance contributions. Now, when you're working for an employer and your statutory sick pay comes to an end, you can actually claim employment support allowance, even though you're still employed and perhaps you are still getting some pay from your employer. So there is some really expert help and support available, and I would always encourage anybody to get expert advice, and really quickly as well, as soon as possible, so that you can make sure you get the right benefit that you're entitled to at the right time. The other big benefits are disability benefits, so they're not means tested either, and they're based on your ability to manage your own personal care and or your mobility. So for an example, if you were under state retirement pension age, you might qualify for something called personal independence payment. And can be quite a generous payment, can be nearly up to £600 every 4 weeks. And that can support you if you're really struggling with getting around, with getting in and out the bath, for example, with dressing, with bathing, with cooking a meal, sorting your medication, or whether you need encouragement to do any of those things, whether you're really struggling with your mental health. There is some tests that you need to go through, so that's called a forward and a backward test. So you need to have struggled with your mobility or care for 3 months in the past, and need to expect to struggle for 9 months in the future. But it doesn't cost anything to ask whether you could possibly qualify for one of those benefits. And again, it's quite important that you seek quality advice as soon as possible. If you're older than your state retirement pension age, or coming up to that age, it's really important that you do seek that advice quite quickly, because once you're at state retirement pension age, and that's different for everybody of course, then you can you can't claim personal independence payment. You can continue to receive it if you're already getting it, but if you wanted to claim straight away, wanted to claim new, then you would have to claim something called attendance allowance. Now that's paid at 2 different rates. That's a lower rate for somebody who struggles just through the day and a higher rate for somebody who's struggling at night time. It's not as generous as personal independence payment, but it is still worth claiming. Neither of those benefits are taxable, and none of them are based on whether you have any savings or what money you have coming in. If you do already get help with benefits, so you might be getting help towards your rent, you might be getting pension credit, then claiming something like attendance allowance won't make you worse off, but could possibly make you a lot better off. So there is also some other one-off benefits that is worth thinking of and worth exploring. So things like carers allowance, which you can claim for somebody who's struggling with their mobility and already getting a disability benefit, such as personal independence payment or attendance allowance. So if you're looking after somebody more than 35 hours a week and you have got a very low income or got no income and not already claiming your state retirement pension and not claiming another what's called an earnings replacement benefit, then potentially you could get carers allowance for helping somebody and caring for them. So again, that's worth exploring. The most important thing about claiming benefits is that you do seek expert advice, and there is a few services to support people living in North Tyneside, and I would really strongly urge people to seek out an expert welfare rights advisor. So there are help and support from helplines across, so there are national ones. So Macmillan do a good helpline which is open 7 days a week from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. And the Maggie's Centre based at the Freeman Hospital also have a welfare rights advisor that you can access by appointment or by telephone. There's also a few other services which the Macmillan Support Centre based at the Freeman Hospital can also refer you to or give you the details about, for you to get that expert advice that will help you just work out whether and what's right for you in your particular circumstances at the right time. As well as looking at your financial welfare rights and disability benefits, any help towards rent, council tax, those types of things, there are other things as well that can help you financially when you're affected by cancer. So hopefully most people who were diagnosed and are going to go through treatment would have been told either by the GP, consultant, specialist nurse that you're entitled to free prescriptions. That application's really straightforward. It's just a name and address and a signature. Can be obtained from your GP, consultant, specialist nurse or the Macmillan Support Centre at the Freeman Hospital, and that can enable you to get free prescriptions for anything, not just what you're taking with regards to your cancer treatment, and it will last for 5 years as well, so always worth thinking about. Also, people can get help with travel costs. Sometimes that's a little unknown and people don't realise that the cost of travelling to hospital, for example, for treatment or for appointments, for consultations, if you're on receipt of a means tested benefit, then you can ask the hospital to refund the cost of your travel. You might have gotten a taxi and that might be £10. Now the hospital wouldn't unfortunately pay the whole £10 towards a taxi, but what they would do is pay you the equivalent of what it might have cost you had you come by metro or bus. That might be £5-6 for example, so you get a contribution towards your travel costs. They can also pay you, if you're coming by car, a certain amount for mileage, which will help, and also towards the cost of parking as well. And that's certainly worth thinking about because that does add up. You have to claim within 3 months of what as well, so that might be useful to think about, to make sure that you haven't forgotten to claim that by the time the 3 months is up. And you can save it all up to the end of the 3 months. I can claim every day or every week, whichever suits you best. There are also some other options in terms of getting to hospital. Lots of people want to know, what can they do for you? What can they do to help you when you've been diagnosed? And one of the best things to do for you and for those around you is to accept that help, particularly if they want to drop you off at your regular radiotherapy appointment, for example. It means that you know you're going to get a reliable person to take you there and pick you back up, hopefully the same person for each of your appointments. It'll save you money, it'll save you worrying about having to park in the hospital, and you're in and out with as least stress as hospitals. That's something to consider. But there are some voluntary services as well if you haven't got anybody that can bring you in to your hospital appointment, and worth asking at the beginning of your consultation. Just jot it down for your discussion with your specialist nurse or your consultant. There are also lots of organisations that will provide small grants and help and support for practical things for us. So for example, Macmillan do one-off grants that can be up to a couple of £100. It might be for some new bedding. It might be to pay towards the cost of replacement bed, or perhaps an iPad or some sort of smartphone to help you communicate with your friends and relatives while you're going through a difficult time. It might be for heating costs or travel costs. Anything that will make your life better during your cancer treatment. Lots of other organisations do one-off grants as well, depending on your particular cancer type. So it's worth asking, as I say, a specialist or expert welfare rights advisor who can do a thorough research for you on what might be available for your particular circumstances. Sometimes it can be things like your ex-employer or a union, or perhaps if you've been in the forces, any of the services. Some organisations also provide practical help and support, and it might be that you've either lost a lot of weight or put on some weight. It might be that you're struggling because you're waiting for welfare benefits to come through and you've been told that it's going to be 3 or 4 weeks before it's paid. And you're really struggling just day to day. Perhaps it's food, perhaps it's household things like washing powder, washing up liquid. And there's organisations across the area which will provide you with what we call a comfort pack. So that might be just a week's worth or 2 weeks worth of shopping to tide you over. Some items that will help you just cut the cost of your daily living just while you get over this particular period of time. So at the Macmillan Centre, the Maggie's Centre, or on the Macmillan Support Line, they can make a referral to different food banks across the area and different support organisations that will help you with that. It's a very quick run through things like making sure that you're entitled to welfare benefits, checking out and checking if your circumstances change, having a look if there's any contribution based benefits as well, seeing if you can access any grants or whether disability benefits might be the right thing for you, making sure that you've got your free prescriptions. So there's an awful lot to take on board there. But what I would also say is you can just keep coming back. If something doesn't feel right, or if you haven't been given the right information, check it and ask for a second opinion if you're not 100% sure of what you've been told. There's a lot of written resources online, a lot of helplines out there as well. Just check. But I would urge against you checking with a neighbour or a friend. As well-meaning and as lovely as those people are, they won't necessarily have the up-to-date, accurate information. Unfortunately, during very quick changing times, welfare rights legislation changes very, very quickly. And it's the best thing to get somebody who really knows what they're talking about. The other areas that people really struggle with are employment advice. You might have had to stop work, you might be on the sick from work, and you might be feeling under pressure from your employer to go back, or perhaps to work from home. You might be already doing that, but it might be feeling that it's not quite working for you. So if you want to know what your rights are, what your obligations are, what your employer's obligations are, and you want to understand those rights and responsibilities, then there's some really great resources available as well. So you've got everything from little books, little booklets to sort of read through and get a summary of what your rights are. There's specialist organisations such as ACAS who can tell you exactly what your employer should be doing for you and guide you. There's also the Macmillan Support Line who have employment guides. They can't tell you what to do and they can't necessarily act and see an appeal for you, but they can certainly give you some expert guidance and support and to help you through negotiating with your employer to find out what they should be providing you with. The other area that can be really challenging and sometimes just really embarrassing to talk about is debts. It can creep upon you, or it can be very, very sudden. You know, you can have gone from bringing in a very nice wage every month to suddenly having next to nothing and thinking, how on earth am I going to meet my mortgage payments, my rent payments, my council tax, gas, electricity, and you don't know where to turn. Again, probably the top tip for dealing with anything like money, employment debts, is to seek advice quickly and do it from a trusted resource. So again, there's lots of options for you, from very, very good local services to national support lines who are available 6 days a week, some of them 7 days a week, and they can help you work through your budget, understand what you must pay, what is priority debts, and what you might be able to negotiate. And often the people that are shouting the loudest are the ones that don't have any legal rights to force you to pay X, Y, or Z. So it can be people like catalogues or loans or credit cards that aren't necessarily secured on your property, for example, and they are probably at the bottom end of the pile, but they might be the ones that's putting the most pressure on you. So an expert debt advisor can help you work out what your budget is, what you can afford to pay in your priority debts, and then what's left for the non-priority debts. Some people have also had really great successes once they've started working with a proper debt agency to write off debts, to make an arrangement which actually works with physically what they've got coming in. Because you just can't, if you haven't got the money, you cannot pay it out. But the tendency is to hide and to pop things in a drawer and think, I'll sort that tomorrow, I haven't got the energy. And absolutely, that's incredibly hard when you're going through treatment and day in, day out, you're exhausted, fatigue's taken over. It can feel like something you just can't cope with. But again, I would urge you to talk to a trusted person, whether it be a friend or a neighbour or family, and help them to seek out an expert to guide you through the maze of what can be something really tricky but can get resolved. And there is usually a solution for almost every circumstance. Might not be perfect, it might not be exactly what you would want, but there usually is an option to make it just that little bit easier. There's lots of random things as well, such as insulation for your home. It can provide you with cutting costs, which is sometimes what you really need to do when you're going through cancer treatment. And there's almost, in the last 30 years that I've supported people with long-term conditions, including cancer, almost every single scenario that I've come across, there is always something that you can do to make things a little bit better. As I say, sadly, no magic wand, and it's not always what will resolve every single thing for you, but it's always worth asking. Good advice costs nothing, and it is there for you.